Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of MSP Business School. As always, I've got Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil here with me, and I'm Brian Doyle, of course. And today's one of our favorite types of topics, Roundtable Day. We'd love to come talk to you and share what we know. But I think today we're going to show you that we're also human a little bit too.
Yeah.
We're gonna tell you how we all got into sales positions early in our career. And then we may share some shocking stories from the field that that may have broken a weaker spirit. Either that or it shows really how too dumb and dense you need to be to have that mentality to have people say no to you 97 times out of 100. But with that said, maybe Rob, you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about how you got into the sales world.
Yeah. So let's see. So after I got out of high school, went into the Army, did the whole Army thing. And then when I got out of the Army, that's when I went back home and started working full time and going to school. And I started off being a benefits manager for, just like a little company. And I was selling payroll benefits right back in the day. And, they wanted to move me into risk management. So I got my property and casualty license, right? Started, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to change the world. Now I'm big time. Yeah. And they promoted me to risk manager, and I was going to do that. And then my very first time that I was doing risk management, I went out to this big company and I was going to change the world. I had all these things that I was going to do, and I had my big sheet, and I was like, the fire extinguisher's not right. This isn't right. And I'm going in there and thinking that I'm changing the world. And not only did they kick me out for just, making a big, because I was like, this is wrong. You can't do this. What a dumbass. I, went in there and I'm trying to change, and they were a client. They were our biggest client. And, they kicked me out of the place because I went in there guns a-blazing thinking, I was the big guy in the room with my 220 license. Went in there, they kicked me out. They threatened the client, my boss, with if I didn't get fired, they were going to leave. The guy was a real jerk, and we kind of banged heads on that one. And I was maybe a week old after getting my 220 license that I did that. And that was when I realized I am not a 220 license type of fella. So stopped doing that. And I was doing that while I was going to school full time. And that was my selling career. I went out of risk management and went back into payroll benefits because it was easier and didn't have to worry about all the crazy people. Then after I did that, that was when I got done with that. I got my degree in medical biology, went into pharmaceutical sales way back in the day when pharmaceutical sales was still a hunting position, right? Instead of a catering position. Sorry for anybody on there that's doing pharmaceutical now. But yeah, and that was probably my most fun sales job that I ever did was, doing that stuff. Got to use all the nerdy stuff, got to talk to doctors all day, about all that kind of stuff. Then I went into automotive sales. I was selling an aftermarket product, and that was a lot of fun. That was where I really learned how to be a really good salesperson. I learned the front end of sales from pharmaceuticals, and how to how to talk to people, how to engage with people. It probably my biggest story was in pharmaceuticals. You had to sell in front of a camera for an hour straight. It was more like a half an hour straight, and you had to do everything perfect, all your mannerisms, all your, you couldn't be clicking pins and all that. And you were graded on this thing, and you kept your job or you didn't keep your job based on this recording. And it took me and my wife almost 9 hours to record that. Yeah, it was 30 minutes, a little 30-minute clip, so I could turn it in and, pass the test and get my job. And so that was where I really learned how to do it. That and the aftermarket products, where the old crusty sales guys were teaching me how to really, get out there and, change the world.
So I got to ask, because I had a 30-second dabbling in the auto industry too. What kind of aftermarket were you selling? Aftermarket insurance GPS warranty? So it's product. Okay.
Yeah. GPS versus LoJack. So, LoJack is, RFI or RFID. And so we were doing GPS back when GPS was really starting to take off in the automotive industry. So yeah, that was it. So we were selling to the salespeople.
For some of the salespeople, dealer sales too.
Dealer sales,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was good.
You see all kinds when you're doing that too.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean, you see all the types. Right?
Guys that really look at technologies, and those guys that are 100 years doing this going, it doesn't matter, son.
Right. He would have his pencil, and he would just go in there with his pencil and paper. I talked to this guy, and that's how he did his whole thing. Brian, you may remember, I grew up with the phone book sales. Oh. Right. Starting the M's, cross it out, call the next person, cross it out. That was how I started off in my employee benefits back in the day in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about that when we get to me, but maybe what we'll do now is kind of get into Tim. Tim's story is a little bit, mostly because the one thing is Tim's the youthful one in the group, although he's getting a little bit older now too. Yeah. But his perspective is probably going to be a little bit different, because I don't think the phone book selling was part of your world, was it, Tim?
No, it wasn't. But I started. So I never really got into sales until after college. Like, I didn't really. I was too busy playing hockey, to be honest with you. So I didn't really have time. Like,
so your parents loved you, man.
Yeah, it was just. So out of college, I started at Northwestern Mutual, and didn't have a phone book, but I mean, you do your normal Project 200 and friends, family, yada yada. It sucked, man. God, it sucked. Straight commission out of college. I looked like I was 12. And, everybody else I knew was either right out of college with me, had no money, or, I've got to go talk to their parents, and they're looking at me like, yeah, you were just drunk in my house last week. What are you doing? This didn't work. So I did that for like 10 months. And then I was a recruiter in the insurance and financial planning world. I actually didn't mind the insurance world. I really didn't. I just didn't like, I didn't like the straight commission aspect. So found a job as a recruiter, but I was trying different than the average recruiter, right? I was trying to move an insurance like agent who was straight commission from one straight commission job to another straight commission job, and that was way more selling than it was recruiting. And I used to have clients all over the country, and I would go to all these once a quarter. I'd go out and meet with insurance reps and try and get them to come over to MetLife, because that's who we're representing most of the time. And there was one time, I don't remember where I was. It might have been maybe Denver, something like that. This one guy, insurance agents can be kind of a pain in the ass overall. So this one guy didn't like the fact that I was representing MetLife, and guy almost fought me in the freaking hotel, because the people would come to you and meet you in the hotel, right? Like you almost do an interview in the hotel lobby, or like there'd be like a office suite thing. Guy almost fought me in the hotel, and this is like one of my first trips, and I'm just like, what in the hell? What is this? Like, is this the way it's supposed to be? So but whatever. That it actually ended up being I actually really enjoyed doing that for a long time. Being able to talk with people and just kind of talk about where they are might be good, but hey, this is better, and here's why. And then after that, I did that for 4 years, but then the recession hit. Oddly enough, in 2008, there weren't a lot of people making moves, because nobody had money. So I got into the MSP industry, and that's when I started at IT Direct. So and God, that was 2009. So I've been in the MSP industry since 2009 at this point. I started out at IT Direct before Robb got there. Was there for about a year and a half on my own. Did pretty well, but Ari, the owner, was still not younger as a company, but still trying to get to that next step from a maturity standpoint, and needed his hands in everything. And then once Robb came along, he finally let go, and that's when we started to grow. So that's kind of my background. Started off a little rocky, but I knew I didn't want I didn't want to do anything else, and I wasn't going back to school. That's for sure.
So Tim, I'm just
Well, it was.
discovering you and I have a common thread that I'll share in just a moment as well, as I learned about your backstory. So I'll say this, for me, I was the son of a salesman. So my father was in the tire industry selling farm tires for a company that ultimately was bought out by Pirelli. And, he was out on the road selling all along, so, all my life. So when I was growing up, it was all about a sales career. That's what I was told I was going to do, whether I didn't want to or not. And, I was supposed to go to college just to make sure I had a degree so I could get a better first sales job. That was kind of how it was. So, it was kind of interesting to me to really, when I think about it now, I'm like, man, there were a lot of different jobs that potentially were available to me that I didn't even know existed, because I was just told you're going to be a sales guy most of my life. Right. So to start that out really starts with high school for me, man. I was Al Bundy before Al Bundy was cool. I think if I remember correctly, Married with Children, for you kiddies out there, I think that came on the scene like around 87, 88. I started selling shoes in 86 at a women's shoe store on top of it at the mall. And I was selling boots and all that. And my big primary goal, the thing that really drove me, was there was a gentleman that was actually doing it full time. And my goal was to come in there every Saturday and just beat him. I want to make sure my rings were higher than his at the end of the day, right? That was my goal. That's how with the fuel there. And that's when I really realized, when I looked at that as sales as a sport, Tim, you mentioned you played hockey. I played baseball, football, and I played baseball up until I was 30. Rob, I suspect we haven't talked about it, but I'm sure there's some sports in your background, but also a guy that challenged himself by going into the service, that says enough as well about you. And I always looked at sales as kind of a competition sport, right? It was always how do I do things that somebody else hasn't done faster, right? And, so when I graduated, I wasn't exactly, on the dean's list coming out of school. It was a little bit more of a, Van Wilder existence where, eventually they say,
2.0.
Yeah, where they eventually said, I think you've done enough time and accrued enough credits. You want to call it a day? Yeah, in May, right? And I came out, and I will profess I was a communication major at the time. So, basically one of those great liberal arts degrees that really put you in a good place. But, I figured learning how to talk would help me in sales. And I had to find a job. So I went to a job fair, and there was a company called Total Communications. And I said, well, that's kismet, man. Obviously that's where I got to go. And I remember, my first in the life of sales, I go to my first interview. And as I'm getting there, I ask for this gentleman, and I get looked at like I got three heads. Then another guy comes out and goes, oh yeah, come with me. I'm going to interview instead. So I go down, sit down for the interview. Well, upon hiring, I found out that while I was there to come in for my interview, the guy that was supposed to interview me was getting fired in the conference room. So that's where I first saw the revolving door of sales front and center. And I remember the guy that interviewed me, I was the first guy he ended up ever hiring. He got promoted into that job as a result of just being there, I think. And I remember him just telling me, and it was for a telecommunications company, dude, there's circuits. And he kept doing this, circuits. I had no idea what a circuit was. I had no idea what technology was, but hey, it said Total Communications. And I'm communications, right? So I'm sitting there, and I get hired, and I have absolutely no clue. And now I'm going to go back to Rob's story from earlier. I get told, here's the phone book. We sell 800 numbers. Call everybody up with an 800 number. Ask them if it's with, at the time it was SNET, now known as Frontier here, and for those in the Northeast. Ask them if it's with SNET. And if it's not, ask them if they want it to be. And this was just as Equal Access was coming out. So it was almost like a cash register thing. Most people didn't even know they had other options for service. So as long as they saw a cheaper number, we were getting in there. So it was like the wild, wild west, which brings me to my first moment of sales adversity. So, now I got this job, and I'm thinking I'm pretty cool, I'm making sales. I'm making a little more money than all my friends, I'm wearing, suited up, baby, Friday happy hour, suited up, thinking we were the coolest. Right. And now I call this lady up, and I tell her, we're an agent for SNET and want to come and talk about her bills. Well, I apparently caught her on a real bad day. When we got to her office, it was snowing out a little bit that morning, and she was 20 minutes, half hour late. We're waiting in the waiting room. That we were told that she was going to be late. She gets there, hair is wet. You could just tell that this is not the way her day was supposed to start. We get in the room, and the first thing I do is give her my business card, right? And it says, Total Communications, a SNET agent. And she loses it. You guys misrepresented yourself. I thought SNET was coming. And I'm like, no way. And of course, I'm with my boss. This is an early sales call. And he's like, what's going on? And she goes, you guys can get out of here. And I was so flustered, I left my appointment book there. So now I'm driving back. I realized I left my appointment book. My boss is like, you got to get back and get that. Our client information's in there, right? This is, of course, it's in an appointment book, not a laptop, because we didn't even have that yet. I didn't have my laptop for a year, right? Keep showing my age here. So now I go back. He goes, turn around. I go to get back. She won't let me in the office. Needless to say, I never got that address book. So I'm a puppy here, man. And I'm like, oh, man. It's really where I'm supposed to be.
Right? This is what I'm going to do.
Dialing from phone books. But now I'm going to dial it back a little bit because I was telling about my first real job. Just like you, Tim, I did a stint as a senior when I was a senior in college with MetLife. Selling insurance. I got my Series 7 back there and back then and all that kind of good stuff. But I remember the moment that I knew it was time for me to get out. So after I exhausted my list of top 50 or whatever it was that they did, my boss came to me on a Wednesday night, handed me the obituaries and the cross street reference index, which basically showed you all the names of people in the streets. And he said, for every guy that died, that look at their street and call everybody else on their block. They're thinking about life insurance right now. I just felt like I can't, look, man, let's be real. Even in IT, man, we sell based on adversity, right? Somebody gets hacked, we probably sell something security, right? Misfortune gets there. But dude, when I made those phone calls that night and I was calling and people were literally crying because some of them knew Jeff down the road, you know what I mean? And I'm telling them, oh, I'm so sorry to call you now, but you can understand in this moment how life insurance is important.
Now's the time.
I just
how'd that work out for you?
Oh my God.
Some people met with me, dude, but it just felt, from a personal level, it felt unethical and dirty. It just didn't feel the way I didn't want to prey on people's insecurities. And let's be fair to the industry. Not everybody did that. No. But what you're seeing here is obviously being bred, told all I was going to be in sales is the only reason I probably struck through these moments, because literally all this happened before I was maybe 3 years in my actual career, right? I was an intern at life as a senior in college. I go to this company and I'm getting kicked out of a place. I didn't know what the sales life was going to be. But then quite frankly, once you settle in, we were selling telecommunications, we were doing things good. But then for me, my segue into IT was accidental. I got hired from Total Communications to go to work for AT&T. And AT&T had a big wireless IPO, back in the late 90s, and it failed miserably. It was supposed to open up at like $60 share, and it opened up at like 12. Oof. And the only way they were going to solve that problem, and it was my first introduction into the word human capital, was through that. And it was then shared with me that my job was at risk, as was probably about a dozen guys that I worked very close with at AT&T. And we were told not to. Now that was a pretty cool situation because we got 6 months to find our next job at AT&T. We were told not to come to the office, only answer the phone if somebody called us, and they got us a cable modem, which back in 98 was almost unheard of. Yeah. But basically, one of my bosses went to go work for an IT services company. And he asked me, he said, hey, when's your deal end? As soon as it's over, we want you to come work here. And that's where I really got to understand a little bit about, it was IT service provider, still pre-MSP days. But what I saw is it was the gift that kept giving. Once you establish something with a customer, you really could go in there and make an impact, become part of their world, affect and change how they operate. And quite frankly, on the back end of it, continue making money. And then you can sell that same customer repeatedly while you're moving to the next customer. And that's how, I fell into IT services. And I say that all day long after those experiences in the past. This is a gift that keeps giving. this industry has been really very good to, I think all three of us, we'd all say that.
Definitely.
It's given us the ability to do wonderful things with our families. And it's because it's really a great community to be a part of. And I'm so thankful that after all the insanity that came before that, we fell into an environment, while challenging and demanding, certainly especially when I was running my MSP and being part of the sales part of it, there were days that I was like, why am I doing this? But the truth is, when you look at the support the community gives to one another, and this was even pre-social media and all the great channels we have available to us today, it really made me believe that, a career that was sales-based to a degree, that allowed me to interact with customers and allowed me to really, impact change in their businesses, at least in one small little fraction. That was pretty rewarding. And now, full circle, I'm kind of glad my dad pushed me into sales, even if I had no choice.
This is the weirdest industry that I've ever been in. It's the most difficult industry to sell in, but it also has the best community that I've seen. Like insurance doesn't have this kind of community, car sales, pharmaceuticals, any of those kind of things. None of them have communities like this one has, which is so weird that somehow it was like, how do you think this whole community thing was built up? But it really is a friendly community where people chat with each other all the time.
Well, you go out to these events, whether, we've talked about how we're doing some of the ASCII events. There's obviously DattoCon, all of these things, right? It's amazing. You go to these events, and the vendors alone, everybody knows it's like a party everywhere you go, because these people, they are on the road together, like the diehards. Some of these vendors, or some of the people in the channel, they're going to 20, 30, 40 shows a year.
Well, what was the stat we heard on Rob Ray of Datto? He spent 310 nights on the road.
So in the early days.
That's the commitment. And I think what you're really touching upon is, it's just what makes the industry great, both customer and from a provider standpoint, is the loyalty. You have to make many mistakes before a customer will jettison you out, which is why I think it's a very hard industry to conduct sales in. But once you earn the right to sell them, you've really earned it. And pretty much they will operate almost on blind faith with you based on the trust you build during that process. Because let's face it, a lot of our customers are small to mid-sized business customers that just don't really understand what we're selling. But if we can articulate how it's going to improve their business, their lives, they'll buy into it no matter what the cost.
100%.
It's unique. It's a unique industry. It's obviously we're biased, but I couldn't imagine not being in the MSP community at this point. Like it's just kind of, it's just.
I tried leaving too. I tried leaving, and it brought me right back. After I exited.
After Rob and I started this, when we were lead gen, it probably wouldn't surprise people to know that we were trying to figure out any way possible to get out and not do lead gen in the MSP community.
It was tough. That was a tough one.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, there is a need for sales in this industry, and there's a need, whether it's account management, farmers, hunters, whatever you want to call them. There's a need for it, and that's what I think keeps us all in it.
I can't leave this industry because I got rid of my Rolodex, my sales Rolodex, Brian, 20 years ago. I don't have it anymore.
Rolodex, that means somebody liked you enough to invest in a Rolodex. I was given a set of index cards in a long metal box.
Oh no, I bought my own because I wanted to take it with me, and I took that thing with me everywhere.
Yeah, when I hear people talk about how it's tough to find leads now, I'm like, dude, we had no internet for at least, it was just coming to. It was the early days of the internet, and even if you were out there, it just didn't have the information we have today. No. So my selling was calling people up from the phone book, getting an expiration date on whatever I sold, and then putting that card in whatever month the expiration date was in my card box.
Brian,
and literally when we got there, that's it. And I'm like, all right, I got 50 people to call this month. Now I just got to call them faster than everybody else in this room.
That's how I came up with the contract end date system here, was from my old Rolodex days with my contract end date. I just brought it here and I was like, all right, well, we're doing that.
And let's get back to that, maybe to close this out. What is old is new, or more importantly, what works. Things that didn't change in the industry. Everybody has a contract. It ends. That's fact.
Yeah.
If you know when that ends, you've increased your opportunity to at least get a meeting.
To get at the table. I don't understand why these people have to try and make it so difficult. Find out the contract end date.
Well, everybody's looking for that new innovative way so they can go from being a salesperson to a sales guru, and now just go talk about all the success they did. But at the end of the day, sales is hard work, right? It's Inspector Clouseau. It's being a detective. It's finding the facts. It's getting creative in how to get them. Today, it's even more creative because let's face it, you make 100 dials, you're going to be lucky to connect with 6 people off of those 100 dials. When we made those 100 dials back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you knew you're going to talk to 25 or 30 people accidentally, right? As part of that. So it increased your odds. So now we got to take a multifaceted approach to building our brand, an email here, a text there, a this here to get to those people. But at the end of the day, it still operates the same. Sales is timing. If we don't know what the right timing is, if you don't know when the customer needs, Rob, if you're 6 months into a 3-year contract, there's nothing I can say to you, no matter how persuasive I am, to make you go, you're right. Let me have you come on down. The only answer
is to buy the contract out for him.
Buy the contract out for him, right? You buy the entire contract.
that goes back to even, the sales enablement is this huge buzzword. It's sales enablement. All it is just follow up with people, just do it professionally, and mix in some calls, emails, some social media.
I'm sure you guys have some great stats. I have an interesting case study that we'll share on one of these episodes. But basically, I think you guys would all agree, no magic happens until you've made at least 4 touches, right? Yeah. It just doesn't even exist till the 4th touch. I profiled an inside salesperson we had. The person made over 5,000 dials. He did his 80 every day, but he stopped the follow-up too quick, right? It was just like black and white. He stopped almost every time. He stopped after 3 contacts. So I challenged him for a month. I said, everybody you just called 3 times, I want you to call him 3 more times this month. Get to 6. See if your numbers go up, right? And sure enough, his 1.8% close rate went to 3.2% in a month because he just, people get familiar, right? They want to hear the pitch a couple times. And it's a lost art, man. It's not so much that it's a lost art, but it takes a committed person to do it. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges the 3 of us have all experienced bringing on salespeople is, do they have the level of commitment to do the hard work to get to the good work?
Yes, that is always, that's really what it boils down to.
My first job, and it sounds like yours, Tim, was that boiler room approach really makes a difference in selling that you just got to do. I mean, my VP of sales, same guy that told me to call the 800 numbers in the phone book and ask him about SNAT, also had a great thing. He said, but this really put it in perspective. He said to me, what do you make every time you sell an 800 number? I'm like, $300. How many phone calls do you need to make to sell one? I'm like, about 100. I know if I do 100 calls, I'll get enough appointments to sell one of those. He goes, so what you're telling me is every no is worth $3. Just pick up the phone and say, I made $3. Eventually, you're going to get the cash out. Yeah. And it really became this principle. And I don't know what your guys' guiding principle is, but it really became the guiding principle for me is, hey, if a sale's worth $1,500 to me and I got to make 200 touches to get it, what's that really mean? It's $10 a touch for me to do the effort to get there. Well, seems reasonable.
That's old school thinking, Brian.
It's old school thinking, but break it down. The mentality should be the same, or at least the thought process should be the same. Problem is sometimes guys want 20 grand for those 10 touches, and I can't solve that problem. Right?
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm off my soapbox. You guys got anything else soapbox before we wrap up for today?
Brian, I was doing a sales call and he was asking me how to solve these, this issue where he's talking with this prospect, right? And he's like, Rob, I just need your help because you're that wise old dog. that can really give me some good insight to tell me how the old school people used to do it. I was like, are you kidding me right now? You just called me an old dog?
Dude,
like,
lean into it, because you know what? The old dog's got all the tricks, right?
I know.
Lean into it. You know what?
Yeah. He felt bad. He was trying to clean it up, and I'm like,
let's be clear. The reason we poke fun at ourselves is because we really know the real reality, which is we are far from old. We're seasoned. Yeah, we're in it. But the point is, there's a lot of good that's out in front of it. And the truth is, some of the principles that were taught to us by the generation before us, who quite frankly probably even did it harder than we did. You know what I mean? And did it more special than we did. But what I learned from the generation before me was about relationships. My dad had, you go back to the 70s, and we're certainly turning this into a long episode, but you go back to the 70s, people didn't go to dinner and eat at restaurants and certainly meet for lunch. These guys used to come to the house. I used to get told, John from Tennessee is coming up to the house, be nice to him. This is what we're going to do. Put on your good clothes, eat dinner, and then leave us because it's going to be the adult time. And this became family to them. And when I really saw how the older guard that I got to work with operated and how they got to be there, no shock that now I run an account management style software, right? Because it was really about, how do you build a relationship that goes beyond just the sale? And if you do that, it goes back to what we said a moment ago. It takes a lot to get you kicked out if you do it right, because you become a friend. Doesn't mean if you do wrong, it won't change the dynamic, but it's all, if you respond well, if you continue to engage and you really try to understand people at a genuine, authentic level, not, oh, are you a Yankee fan? So am I, and you're a Red Sox fan underneath it, right? It's agree with what you agree with, stay to your principles, but be authentic in the relationship. You don't have to love everybody and believe what they say, but there's usually common ground out there somewhere. Find it, make a friend, treat them well, and you've got a customer for life and probably a referral source too.
Yeah, very true.
All right, guys, that pretty much wraps it up today for, a trip down memory lane here. With all of our battle scars.
Maybe that's what we'll call these three old guys on a stoop. It'll be this week's episode.
That's right. Get off my grass. So just to let everybody know, we will have this episode up on mspbusinessschool.com or anywhere that you get your podcast. If you have any ideas or you have something that you would like us to chat about, please let us know. If you have a proposal or a client that you're dealing with that you're trying to solve the puzzle of, closing the deal, let us know. We'd be happy to help.
Rob, if I could add to that, best way to do that, go up to our website. You can submit right there on the site. Go up to any of our social media outlets, post your question there. We're here to help.
Yep. All right, fellas.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.